How's it going, everyone? It's Tommy from Weather SpongeBob. Today is June 14th, 2021, and today we're going to focus on two potential tropical storms that will form this week in the Atlantic. We have, of course, Tropical Depression 2 that's just off the coast of North Carolina at this point, and we have the next potential tropical storm that could form in the Gulf of Mexico this week. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather accounts. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather accounts. So let's begin by taking a look at the current IR loop for the entire Atlantic, and we have three disturbances we are currently watching. We are watching one that's coming off the coast of Africa at this time, where currently there's a strong monsoon over that region. So of course there's a lot of convection coming off the coast, the western coast of Africa, and as a result this does have a slight chance of developing, only a 20% chance at this point, but however it could rise as it heads further westward. And then we of course have Invest 92L, which we've been talking about over the past couple days, that has a chance of formation, and now it is likely to form in the future. And we have Tropical Depression 2, which just formed this morning out of nowhere, because yesterday I wasn't even talking about it, but now we have a tropical depression just off the coast of North Carolina. So let's begin by taking a look at Invest 92L at this point, which is currently just to the west of the Yucatan Peninsula. Zooming in a little bit into the satellite imagery of Invest 92L, and you see that it's very disorganized. The convection is all over the place. We don't really have one centralized area where the convection is, or where the center of circulation is, as there seems to be a lot of dry air towards the northern portion of this storm, and that's partially due to the amount of wind shear that's located in this region and the high amount of upper level winds as a result of an upper level high that's located in the region, and that's bringing stronger upper level winds and wind shear to the region, bringing a lot of that dry air towards the northern portion of this storm, and it's pretty much suppressing this storm from moving any further northward, despite the lower level winds from a ridge that's located in the middle of the Atlantic trying to push the storm further northward. But you see that if you see the whiter cloud tops, you see that in the lower levels the clouds are moving to the east, but in the upper levels where you see the blow of thunderstorm activity, you see that it's moving towards the east, while the lower level clouds are moving towards the west, which shows that there's pretty strong wind shear right now in this region, especially on the northward side. If we were to take a look at the current wind shear map, you see that the strong upper level winds are coming primarily from the northwest as a result of the angle of which the upper level high is located. If we were to take a look at the GFS model, you see that that upper level high is bringing that wind shear to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's inhibiting the storm from really developing. However, that could change in the future, because the this upper level high is expected to move out, and we're going to see an upper level low move through Texas, and it's going to bring more of a northerly wind component in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And while the wind shear will still be relatively strong thanks to the contrast between wind speed with height, because upper level winds are going to be much stronger than the lower level winds, the winds are going to sort of coincide with each other, where the upper level winds will pretty much go the same direction as the lower level winds, which means that the wind shear will be lighter, and that the storm is less likely to die out, because the pretty much the upper level winds are coinciding with the lower level winds, which means that especially on the eastern side of this storm, the winds will be strong, which could pose a threat of a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico. If we were to take a look at the current chance of tropical cyclone development, the chance has risen to 70%, which is on the upper end, which means that we're more likely than not going to see some sort of tropical depression or tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico within the next 5 days. Over the next 48 hours, the chance still remains low at 20%, but beyond 48 hours, you of course see the chance rises to 70% chance. So we're likely to see Tropical Storm Claudette at this point, assuming that Tropical Depression 2 eventually develops into Tropical Storm Bill, which I do believe is most likely at this point. So we're likely to see Tropical Storm Claudette in the Gulf of Mexico, and the problem is that this is expected to move straight northward and could impact the Gulf Coast later this week and into early next week. So you guys along Gulf Coast, especially right around Texas and Louisiana, needs to start paying close attention to this, because it's becoming more and more likely that you guys will get impacted. And it's really pretty much it applies to pretty much every storm in the Gulf of Mexico, since the Gulf of Mexico is pretty much surrounded all by land. It's very unlikely that somehow a tropical system would avoid land entirely. So I'd say the entire Gulf Coast, from the Panhandle of Florida all the way to Texas and into Mexico, you guys need to pay close attention to this, because it's becoming more likely that you guys will experience land impacts from this storm, whether it develops or not. And it's most likely going to develop based off of what the computer models are saying and based off of how the current conditions are looking like. So keep that in mind. If we were to take a look at the sea surface temperatures, again, you of course see they're more than sufficient enough to develop this storm. Just very warm water. We're seeing the sea surface temperatures right around 29 degrees Celsius, which is warm enough for tropical cyclone development, more than warm enough for tropical cyclone development. And if we were to take a look at the relative humidity in the mid levels of the atmosphere, between the levels of the atmosphere where the air pressure is between 400 millibars to 700 millibars, you see that there's going to be a continuous influx of moisture over the next couple of days coming from Central America. And this is as a result of just a very strong monsoon that's going on just south of the Saharan Desert. And that's pulling all that moisture to Central America, which is going to moisten up the atmosphere for potentially Tropical Storm Claudette to develop, and it's going to have more than enough moisture in the Gulf of Mexico. We still have to wait and see how much dry air there will be in Texas and Louisiana at this point, because that could be key in determining how much this develops. If this maybe develops into a high-end tropical storm or even a hurricane, which at this point is still unlikely, but we can't rule it out. And it really all depends on how much dry air there is. If there's a lot more dry air, then it's less likely we're going to see it develop much more than a weak tropical storm. And who knows, maybe even weaken by the time it reaches Louisiana and Texas, thanks to just the sheer amount of dry air. However, if the dry air is limited, or the storm is able to stay surrounded by a moist atmosphere or air mass, then we're more likely to see the storm develop, and it could develop maybe into a high-end tropical storm. Really depends on the wind shear, the amount of dry air. You see that later during the run, the dry air begins to infiltrate the southwestern side of the storm, which has been the trend from both the computer models. So that is currently limiting the chance that this develops much more than a weak tropical storm headed into Louisiana. But again, we're still forecasting this 5 days out. There's still a lot that could change. So we still have to wait and see. But I'd say the most likely scenario is that this will be a weak tropical storm. But do not be surprised if the forecast changes over the next several days, because again, we're forecasting this 5 days out. If we were to take a look at what the European model is saying, it's also agreeing that there's going to be a good amount of dry air on the eastern side of this storm. And you see that this low pressure system drops down to 999 millibars, which is slightly stronger than the GFS model. And we do see it at one point get down to 998 millibars, which is equivalent to, I'd say, right around a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. And while that isn't strong by any means, it still poses a threat of heavy rain throughout Louisiana. And I'd expect that the eastern side of this storm will receive the most moisture, because it's going to be pretty much protected from the dry air. The dry air is primarily going to be on the western side, and the stronger wind shear is going to come from the west, which will steer the most of the dry air to the western side of the storm, while the eastern side should be the more moist part. So even if you're far to the east of the eye in Louisiana or Texas, you need to pay close attention to this, because that rain could extend miles beyond the center of circulation. So we need to certainly keep that in mind. In terms of the track forecast over the next couple of days, taking a look at what the spaghetti models are saying, we do see that the spaghetti models have been trending mainly towards bringing this to, I'd say, right around Louisiana at this point. However, exactly where in Louisiana remains to be seen, because there is that possibility it could go towards the western side of Louisiana and maybe closer to Texas. However, there's also that possibility it heads towards the eastern side of Louisiana and it impacts more New Orleans and the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and maybe even as far east as Alabama. So there's still a lot of questions that remain regarding the track of this storm, and what will determine the track is really it really all depends on if there's a very strong trough moving through, if there's strong wind shear, because if the wind shear is a little bit stronger that and the storm's a little bit more weaker, then I'd suspect that it'll take a more eastward track, because since the storm is weaker, that means that that means that I mean actually, if the storm is stronger, then I think that the storm is more likely to move further eastward, because if the storm's stronger, the cloud tops are higher, and that means the upper level winds will have more of an effect on the track of this storm, because the overall circulation and the overall storm is taller, which means that the upper level winds will have more of an effect. But if it's weaker, then we're more likely to see the storm stay mainly towards the western side, since we're less likely to see the upper level winds taking effect with the cloud tops lower than, let's say, in a stronger storm. So we just need to wait and see. It really all depends on the strength of the storm, and the strength depends on how much wind shear there will be, of course, and how much dry air there will be, which remains to be seen. At this point, there is at least expected to be a little bit of wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico based off of what the GFS model is saying. However, it won't be so much to completely kill the storm, and in fact might enhance the winds on the eastern side of the storm, since the northerly winds and the lower level of the upper levels and lower level winds will coincide with each other. So we need to just stay tuned to our forecast. However, assuming that this does make landfall somewhere in Louisiana, we also need to take a look at what sort of impacts you guys should experience. And you see that if this were the case right now, you see that heavy rain should be expected throughout eastern Louisiana, extending to Mississippi, Alabama, and into even further northward into Georgia. So you guys need to pay close attention to this at this point in the Gulf of Mexico, because it seems like we're likely to see Gulf Coast impacts in the United States, whether this makes landfall as a tropical storm or not. And this is expected to develop into a tropical storm based off of what we're seeing. The wind shear is going to be just light enough to support some development. There's going to be just enough of a moist atmosphere, and water temperatures will be more than sufficient enough to support for tropical cyclone developments. But again, we just need to wait and see how much dry air and wind shear there will be in the Gulf of Mexico. So stay tuned for that. In terms of the current track and intensity forecast that I'm forecasting, keep in mind these are just my thoughts, these are just my speculation. If you want to make decisions, seek official info from the National Hurricane Center or the National Weather Service. Is just my speculation and opinion, and you see that I'm forecasting this to develop and peak just before landfall at around 50 miles per hour Sunday morning. So keep in mind, I'm forecasting this 6 days out, so a lot could change till Sunday morning regarding the forecast, but this is currently how it's looking like right now. It'll be at least a mid-level tropical storm making landfall between Texas and Louisiana. However, again, this forecast is subject to change, so stay tuned for that when it comes to the timing of this. But of course, this is not the only tropical disturbance we are watching. We're also watching potential, most likely will be Tropical Storm Bill, which is expected to move straight towards the northwest at this point and not be much of an impact towards land, which is definitely good news. If we were to take a look at the current forecast, you see that this is expected to move out to sea. It won't stay very close to land to bring any sort of major impacts. If we were to take a look at the IR loop at this point, you see that of course the storm is very sheared. It has a very extra tropical cyclone look to it, a mid-latitude cyclone look to it, where we do see that bow echo, the dry air on the southwestern side of the storm, and we see convection on the eastern side of this storm. So this is somewhat subtropical. I'd say it's over the warmer Gulf Stream waters at this point, which is certainly helping this develop. However, if this does develop, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a subtropical storm, because it's dealing with a lot of instability from this frontal boundary, and we're seeing just very cooler than average conditions in the northeast at this point. So the instability will certainly help this storm maintain its strength and potentially strengthen as it moves further and further to the northeast. But however, it isn't expected to impact land, which is certainly good news. I don't expect much of any impacts along the northeast coast besides maybe higher surf than usual, but it shouldn't be anything major. But this is expected to be Tropical Storm Bill, which is our next named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. It could be second of many storms we will experience in the 2021 hurricane season, so we need to certainly keep that in mind. Again, taking a look at my forecast track, I do expect this to strengthen to a tropical storm. I'd say later today, most likely there's going to be just enough unstable air. It's going to be over just enough warm water to strengthen a little bit, and I'm sure the wind shear the upper level winds will certainly help, because it's sort of coinciding with the direction the storm is going, and then it should strengthen a little bit more to 55 miles per hour once we really do see that instability strengthen. And then I do expect it to become extra tropical sometime on Tuesday, and still maintaining 50-mile-per-hour strength. But again, nothing major, and this is expected to go out to sea. No major impacts along the northeast coast besides maybe rough surf. So that's certainly good news that it won't impact the northeast. But the Gulf Coast, pay close attention to this, because we could see a tropical storm that could bring heavy rainfall and gusty winds possible if this does develop into its peak intensity. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content.